The sound of my circular saw cutting through pine echoed across the empty school playground as I measured the final piece for what would become the most important project of my carpentry career. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never imagined that building a simple wheelchair ramp would lead me back to the one person who had completely disappeared from my life 15 years ago. Emma Rodriguez had been my everything in high school, and now she was standing 30 feet away in a tailored business suit, watching me work on a ramp for her daughter Sophie, completely unaware that the carpenter she'd hired through the school district was the same boy who used to drive her home in his beat-up pickup truck every day after chemistry class. Chen wiped the sawdust from his weathered hands as he pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Elementary School on that crisp October morning. His truck, a 15-year-old Ford that had seen better days but still ran like a dream, looked distinctly out of place among the sleek SUVs and luxury sedans that typically occupied this particular corner of town. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was here to build accessibility improvements at one of the most expensive private schools in Riverside, Oregon, funded by donations from parents who probably spent more on their monthly car payments than he made in 3 months. At 34, Liam had built a reputation as one of the most skilled Finnish carpenters in the Pacific Northwest, specializing in custom work that required both artistic vision and meticulous attention to detail. His small workshop on the industrial side of town might not look like much from the outside, but the furniture and architectural elements that emerged from that space had earned him clients from Portland to Seattle. Still, most of his income came from practical projects like kitchen renovations and deck repairs for middle-class families who appreciated quality craftsmanship at reasonable prices. This particular job had come through the school district's Accessibility Compliance Office, a straightforward commission to build a wooden ramp that would allow wheelchair access to the school's new library wing. The existing concrete ramp had been damaged during recent construction, and rather than wait months for a concrete contractor, the school had opted for a temporary wooden solution that needed to be both functional and aesthetically pleasing enough to satisfy the discerning tastes of their donor families. Liam had spent the previous evening reviewing the architectural plans and calculating materials, ensuring that his design would exceed ADA requirements while complementing the school's traditional brick and ivy aesthetic. He took pride in never delivering merely adequate work, regardless of whether the client was a tech millionaire or a struggling single mother who needed her front steps repaired. Quality was quality, and his reputation had been built on the principle that every project deserved his complete attention and skill. The morning air carried the scent of fallen leaves and the distant aroma of coffee from the faculty lounge as Liam began unloading his tools from the truck bed. His work clothes were clean but showed the honest wear of a man who made his living with his hands, and his steel-toed boots had been resoled twice because he couldn't justify replacing equipment that still served its purpose. The contrast between his practical appearance and the carefully maintained elegance of his surroundings was stark, but Liam had long ago learned to ignore the subtle looks and whispered comments that sometimes accompanied his presence in more affluent neighborhoods. 20 miles across town, Emma Rodriguez stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Columbia Tower, watching the morning fog lift from the Willamette River as she prepared for another day of managing one of the region's most successful development companies. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Pacific Northwest Development Group had grown from a small commercial real estate firm into a major player in sustainable urban planning, with projects spanning from Vancouver to San Francisco. At 33, Emma had achieved everything she'd dreamed of during those late nights studying in the Riverside High School library, when college seemed like an impossible financial stretch, and business school felt like pure fantasy. Her MBA from Stanford had opened doors that led to consulting positions with Fortune 500 companies, eventually culminating in her appointment as CEO of PNDG 3 years earlier. The business magazines that featured her on their covers inevitably focused on her success as a young Latina executive in a male-dominated industry, but Emma knew that her achievements had come through relentless preparation and an almost obsessive attention to detail that had served her well in both boardrooms and courtrooms. Her morning routine included reviewing overnight emails from international partners, checking project timelines for developments in 3 different time zones, and preparing for a board presentation that could determine whether PNDG would secure the contract for Seattle's largest mixed-use development project. The stakes were always high in her world, where decisions involved millions of dollars and affected thousands of lives. But Emma thrived on the pressure that had driven lesser executives to burnout or career changes. The personal cost of her professional success was something she preferred not to examine too closely during business hours. Her marriage to Marcus, a fellow Stanford graduate who worked in venture capital, had ended 2 years earlier when they finally acknowledged that their relationship had become more of a strategic partnership than a romantic connection. The divorce had been amicable and financially straightforward, but the custody arrangement for their daughter Sophie remained complicated by Emma's travel schedule and Marcus's recent relocation to Los Angeles for a new position. Sophie Rodriguez Martinez was 8 years old and possessed the kind of determined spirit that reminded Emma of herself at that age, though their circumstances could hardly have been more different. Born with spina bifida, Sophie navigated the world from a lightweight wheelchair that she operated with the confidence of a NASCAR driver, never allowing her mobility differences to slow down her pursuit of adventures that often left Emma simultaneously proud and terrified. The morning's agenda included dropping Sophie off at Riverside Elementary before heading to the office, a routine that Emma treasured despite the logistics involved in ensuring that Sophie's wheelchair and medical supplies were properly arranged. Sophie attended Riverside Elementary through a special enrollment program that Emma had helped establish, bringing together children from diverse economic backgrounds while maintaining the academic standards that justified the substantial tuition costs. Liam was adjusting the angle on his miter saw when he heard the distinctive sound of wheelchair wheels rolling across the concrete pathway behind him. He looked up to see a young girl with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, maneuvering her chair with practiced ease while balancing a stack of library books in her lap. She wore the forest green uniform of Riverside Elementary, but her sneakers were decorated with hand-drawn rocket ships in silver marker, suggesting a personality that refused to be contained by institutional dress codes. "Are you building the new ramp?" Sophie asked, bringing her chair to a stop just outside his work area with the kind of directness that only children possessed. Her eyes were bright with curiosity as she examined his tools and the precisely cut lumber arranged in neat stacks around the construction site. "That's the plan," Liam replied, setting down his measuring tape and crouching to her eye level. "I'm Liam. What's your name?" "Sophie Rodriguez Martinez," she announced with the formality of someone accustomed to introducing herself to adults. "I'm going to be using this ramp every day, so I want to make sure you're building it right. The old one was too steep and made my arms tired." Liam couldn't help but smile at her serious tone. "Well, Sophie Rodriguez Martinez, I promise this ramp is going to meet all the safety standards and then some. Would you like to see the plans?" For the next 20 minutes, Liam found himself explaining the principles of ADA-compliant construction to an 8-year-old who asked surprisingly sophisticated questions about grade percentages, handrail heights, and weather-resistant finishes. Sophie's understanding of physics and engineering concepts impressed him. But more than that, he was struck by her matter-of-fact approach to discussing her mobility needs without any trace of self-consciousness or frustration. "My mom says you're the best carpenter in Riverside," Sophie mentioned as she examined the detailed drawings Liam had sketched for the project. "She researched like 15 different contractors before she picked you. She researches everything." "Your mom sounds very thorough," Liam replied, wondering what kind of parent went to such lengths to ensure their child's accessibility needs were met with this level of attention to detail. In his experience, most families were satisfied with basic functionality, but someone had clearly specified that this ramp needed to be both highly functional and visually seamless with the school's architecture. "She's a CEO," Sophie said with obvious pride. "She builds whole neighborhoods and office buildings, but she doesn't know how to use power tools like you do." One time, she tried to hang a picture and put the nail through a water pipe. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of heels clicking rapidly across the parking lot. Liam looked up to see a woman in a charcoal gray business suit approaching with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to managing multiple crises simultaneously. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional style, and she carried herself with the confident posture that came from years of commanding boardrooms and negotiating million-dollar deals. The moment their eyes met, Liam felt the world shift slightly on its axis. 15 years dissolved in an instant, and he was 18 again, sitting in the back row of AP Chemistry while Emma Rodriguez explained molecular bonds with the same intense focus she brought to everything that mattered to her. She was older now, more polished, carrying the weight of professional responsibility that had shaped her features into something more angular and determined than the soft curves of her teenage face. But her eyes were exactly the same, dark brown with flecks of gold that caught the light when she was thinking. Emma stopped walking so abruptly that she nearly stumbled, her professional composure cracking for just a moment as recognition dawned. "Liam Chen," she said, and his name sounded different in her voice than it had 15 years ago, weighted with history and careful neutrality. "Hello, Emma," Liam replied, straightening to his full height while acutely aware that his work clothes and tool belt probably made him look exactly like what he was, a working-class contractor who fixed things for a living. The contrast between them was stark and immediate, highlighting the divergent paths their lives had taken since graduation. Sophie looked back and forth between them with the shrewd observation skills that children develop when they're accustomed to reading adult emotions for important information. "Do you two know each other?" she asked, her tone suggesting that she had already figured out the answer. "We went to high school together," Emma said, maintaining the kind of diplomatic tone she probably used in business meetings when discussing potentially complicated partnerships. "It's been a long time." 15 years, Liam confirmed, though he could have calculated it down to the month if pressed. "You look good, Emma. Success suits you." The compliment hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than either of them was prepared to acknowledge in front of Sophie. Emma's cheeks flushed, slightly, a reaction that reminded Liam of the girl who used to blush when he complimented her understanding of thermodynamics or praised her essay on environmental policy. "Mom, Mr. Liam is building the best ramp ever," Sophie announced, apparently deciding that the adults needed help navigating their obvious discomfort. "He showed me all the plans and explained about grade percentages and everything. He knows about physics." "I'm sure he does," Emma replied, her voice softening as she looked at her daughter. Physics was always one of his strongest subjects. The comment revealed more than Emma probably intended, suggesting that she remembered details about his academic performance that went beyond casual high school acquaintanceship. Liam felt a familiar warmth in his chest, the same feeling he used to get when Emma would save him a seat in study hall or ask for his opinion on her college application essays. "Sophie, we need to get you inside for first period," Emma said, glancing at her watch with the automatic gesture of someone whose life was governed by precise scheduling. "Mr. Chen has work to do, and I have a conference call in 20 minutes. Can I come back at lunch to see how the ramp is coming along?" Sophie asked, directing the question to Liam with the assumption that he would be the more accommodating adult in this situation. "If it's okay with your mom," Liam replied, looking to Emma for permission while trying to read the complex emotions playing across her features. Emma hesitated for a moment, clearly weighing multiple considerations that Liam couldn't begin to guess. "If Mr. Chen doesn't mind the interruption," she finally agreed, "you can check on the progress during lunch break." "I don't mind at all," Liam said, meaning it completely. "Sophie asks better questions than most of my adult clients." After Emma and Sophie headed toward the school building, Liam stood alone among his tools and lumber, trying to process the unexpected collision between his past and present. He had often wondered what had become of Emma Rodriguez, especially during the first few years after graduation, when her absence from his life felt like a physical ache. But he had never imagined encountering her in circumstances that highlighted so clearly how differently their lives had unfolded. Emma Rodriguez had become exactly what she had always said she would become: a successful professional who commanded respect and wielded real influence in the world. She drove a luxury sedan, wore clothes that probably cost more than his monthly rent, and spoke with the confident authority of someone accustomed to having her opinions matter in important decisions. Liam Chen had become a carpenter, a profession that he loved and took enormous pride in, but one that placed him firmly in the working class that people like Emma probably thought about only when they needed something built, fixed, or installed. The gap between their current circumstances felt vast and potentially unbridgeable, no matter how strong their connection had been 15 years earlier. Yet he couldn't forget the way Emma's face had softened when she looked at Sophie, or the genuine warmth in her voice when she mentioned his physics abilities. Somewhere beneath the polished exterior of the successful CEO was the girl who used to meet him at his locker between classes, who had helped him study for the SATs even though her scores were already good enough for any college in the country, who had cried in his arms the night before graduation because she was terrified that college would change them both beyond recognition. As Liam picked up his circular saw and returned to cutting boards for the ramp framework, he found himself working with unusual care, knowing that this project would be scrutinized not just by Sophie's practical needs, but by Emma's discerning eye. He wanted to build something that would prove he had become exactly what he had always intended to become, a craftsman who created beautiful, functional solutions that improved people's lives in tangible ways. The morning sun climbed higher as Liam lost himself in the familiar rhythm of measuring, cutting, and fitting pieces together with the precision that had earned him his reputation. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this ramp would be more than just another project, that somehow the careful construction of wheelchair access was going to rebuild a bridge between two people who had loved each other completely before the world convinced them they wanted different things. The invitation came 3 days later, delivered by Sophie herself during her lunch break visit to check on the ramp's progress. She wheeled up to where Liam was installing the handrails, carrying a cream-colored envelope with the formal weight of expensive stationery. "Mom wants to know if you'd like to come to dinner on Saturday," Sophie announced with the directness that Liam had come to expect from her. "She says it's to thank you for doing such good work on the ramp, but I think she just wants to talk to you more." Liam paused in his drilling, studying the envelope that bore his name in Emma's familiar handwriting. The invitation felt loaded with possibilities and complications that he wasn't sure he was ready to navigate. "What do you think, Sophie? Should I come to dinner?" "Definitely," Sophie replied without hesitation. "Mom's been different since she met you again. She keeps staring out the window during breakfast, and yesterday she burned the eggs because she was thinking about something else. Plus, she made me clean my room twice this week, which only happens when she's nervous about something important." The insight into Emma's state of mind both thrilled and worried Liam. He had been thinking about her constantly since their encounter, finding excuses to work longer hours at the school, just for the chance of seeing her during pickup or drop-off times. But he had assumed that her professional composure meant she was largely unaffected by their reunion. "There's just one thing," Sophie continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Mom doesn't know that I know about you two being more than just high school classmates. I found her old yearbook last weekend, and I saw all the pictures of you together at dances and stuff, plus there were like 50 love letters in a box in her closet. I wasn't snooping on purpose, I was looking for my winter boots." Liam felt his chest tighten at the revelation that Emma had kept their correspondence from high school. He had wondered countless times whether she ever thought about their relationship, or if she had simply moved on without looking back. The knowledge that she had preserved those memories suggested that their connection had meant as much to her as it had to him. "So you know that your mom and I used to date," Liam said carefully, unsure how much an 8-year-old should be involved in the complicated emotions swirling between the adults in her life. "I know you were her boyfriend, and I know something happened that made you both really sad," Sophie replied with the matter-of-fact tone she used for discussing complex topics. "But I don't know what, because Mom won't talk about high school very much. She always changes the subject when I ask about her teenage years." Saturday evening found Liam standing outside the front door of Emma's house in the Riverside Hills neighborhood, holding a bottle of wine and questioning every decision that had led him to this moment. The house was a stunning example of contemporary architecture, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that maximized the view of the valley below. The landscaping was professionally maintained, and the driveway held Emma's luxury sedan alongside a smaller hybrid vehicle that probably served as her daily commuter car. Liam had spent an embarrassing amount of time selecting his clothes for the evening, ultimately settling on dark jeans and a button-down shirt that walked the line between casual and respectful. He had considered bringing flowers but decided that wine was less romantically loaded while still acknowledging the formality of a dinner invitation. Emma answered the door wearing a sleek, flowing navy dress that managed to be both elegant and approachable, her hair loose around her shoulders in a style that reminded him powerfully of their high school years. She smiled warmly, but with a hint of nervousness that made him feel slightly less anxious about his own emotional state. "You found the house okay," she said, stepping aside to let him enter the foyer with its polished hardwood floors and modern art that probably cost more than his truck. "Your directions were very thorough," Liam replied, offering the wine and trying not to stare at the stunning interior of her home. Everything was perfectly appointed and meticulously maintained, creating an atmosphere of success and sophistication that felt both impressive and slightly intimidating. Sophie appeared at the top of the curved staircase, wearing a dress that matched her mother's in color, but was accessorized with the same rocket ship sneakers she had worn to school. "Liam, come see my room. I want to show you my book collection." "After dinner, sweetheart," Emma interjected gently. "Let's give Mr. Chen a chance to sit down first." The dining room continued the theme of understated luxury, with a table that could easily seat 12 but was set intimately for 3. Emma had clearly gone to considerable effort with the meal, preparing what Liam recognized as his favorite dishes from their high school days, updated with sophisticated preparation techniques that reflected her adult palate and cooking skills. "I can't believe you remembered that I love seafood pasta," Liam said as Emma served a dish that featured perfectly cooked scallops over linguine with a white wine sauce that smelled incredible. "I remember most things about you," Emma replied, then seemed to realize how revealing the comment was. "I mean, we spent a lot of time together senior year." Some details stick. Dinner conversation flowed easily, helped by Sophie's presence and her endless questions about Liam's carpentry work, his tools, and the various projects he had completed around Riverside. Emma listened with obvious interest as he described restoring a Victorian house downtown, building custom furniture for a local art gallery, and teaching woodworking classes at the community center on weekends. "You always said you wanted to build things that would last longer than you did," Emma commented during a pause in Sophie's interrogation. "It sounds like you're doing exactly that." "What about you?" Liam asked. "Are you building the kinds of communities you used to dream about when we talked about changing the world?" Emma's expression grew thoughtful as she considered the question. "I'm trying to. PNDG focuses on sustainable development and affordable housing integration. So we're not just building for people who can afford luxury. But the business side is complicated. Investors want returns, city councils want tax revenue, and community groups want preservation of neighborhood character. Balancing all those interests while still creating something meaningful is harder than I expected when I was 18 and thought good intentions were enough." After dinner, while Sophie showed Liam her impressive collection of science fiction novels and explained her theories about space travel, Emma cleaned up in the kitchen with the efficient movements of someone accustomed to managing multiple tasks simultaneously. When Liam offered to help, she waved him off, but he could see her watching him through the kitchen doorway as he listened seriously to Sophie's detailed plans for building a rocket ship in their backyard. The evening's turning point came when Sophie excused herself to finish homework, leaving Liam and Emma alone together for the first time since their reunion. They moved to the living room, settling onto opposite ends of a sectional sofa that probably cost more than most people's cars, but the physical distance between them felt charged with emotional proximity. "She's amazing," Liam said, referring to Sophie. "You've done an incredible job raising her." "Thank you," Emma replied, her voice soft with parental pride. "She's been through a lot with the divorce and the medical stuff, but she's so resilient. Sometimes I think she's handling everything better than I am." The mention of her divorce opened a door that Liam wasn't sure he should walk through, but Emma continued before he could decide whether to ask questions. "Marcus and I were never right for each other," she said, staring at her hands. "We looked good on paper, same educational background, compatible career goals, similar social circles. But we never had what you and I had in high school. We never had that feeling of being completely understood by another person." The admission hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that both thrilled and terrified Liam. He wanted to reach across the sofa and take her hand, to tell her that he had never stopped loving her, that 15 years of dating other people had only confirmed that what they had shared was unique and irreplaceable. But he was acutely aware of the vast differences in their current circumstances, the gap between her executive lifestyle and his working-class reality. "Emma," he began carefully, "I need you to know that seeing you again has been incredible, but I also need to be realistic about where we are now. You're a CEO living in a house that could be featured in architectural magazines, and I'm a carpenter who lives in a 2-bedroom apartment above my workshop. I don't want to complicate your life or make things difficult for Sophie." Emma looked at him with an expression that mixed frustration with something that might have been disappointment. Do you really think that's all I care about? Money and status and what things look like from the outside. I think you've built a successful life that required certain choices and priorities. Liam replied. I think you're probably under pressure to maintain appearances and professional relationships that might not include dating a blue-collar contractor. The conversation was interrupted by Sophie calling from upstairs that she needed help with a math problem, giving both adults a reprieve from a discussion that was becoming increasingly emotionally charged. As Emma went to help her daughter, Liam stood at the living room windows, looking out at the city lights spread across the valley, and wondering whether some bridges were too damaged by time and circumstance to be rebuilt, no matter how much both people might want to try. The photograph appeared in the Riverside Business Journal 3 weeks later, accompanied by an article titled, Tech CEO's Personal Life Raises Questions About Professional Judgment. The image showed Emma and Liam walking together through downtown Riverside, captured during what had been an innocent Saturday afternoon visit to the farmer's market with Sophie. In the photo, they looked comfortable together, laughing at something Sophie had said while sharing a bag of kettle corn, appearing for all the world like a happy family enjoying a weekend outing. Liam discovered the article when his neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, brought it to his workshop with barely concealed excitement about seeing someone she knew featured in the local business publication. His stomach dropped as he read the accompanying text, which questioned whether Emma Rodriguez's personal relationships might be influencing her professional decisions, particularly regarding PNDG's upcoming bid for a major city construction contract that would involve hiring local subcontractors. The article stopped just short of making direct accusations, but the implications were clear. The journalist had done enough research to identify Liam as a carpenter who had done work for the school district, suggesting potential conflicts of interest in Emma's professional dealings. References to her recent divorce and questionable personal associations painted a picture of a CEO whose judgment might be compromised by emotional entanglements that fell outside the expected social circles of corporate leadership. Emma called that evening while Liam was finishing a cabinet installation for a longtime client, her voice tight with controlled anger and barely suppressed panic. "Have you seen the journal article?" she asked without preamble. "I've seen it," Liam replied, setting down his sander and stepping outside to take the call privately. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I had no idea anyone was paying attention to us." Richard Blackstone called an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. Emma continued, referring to PNDG's chairman and largest investor. "He's concerned about potential public relations issues that might affect our pending contracts. Apparently, several board members have received calls from concerned community leaders who think my personal life is becoming a distraction from company business." The pain in Emma's voice was palpable, and Liam felt a surge of protective anger toward the people who were using their relationship as ammunition against her professional accomplishments. "What can I do to help? Do you want me to talk to the reporter and clarify that there's no conflict of interest? I can explain that the school district hired me through a competitive bidding process that had nothing to do with you." "That might make things worse," Emma said wearily. "Any response from either of us will just give the story more attention. Richard thinks the best approach is to let it die down naturally, but that means avoiding any public appearances together until the contract situation is resolved." "How long will that take?" Liam asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Months, possibly longer. The city council vote isn't scheduled until spring, and then there's the implementation phase. Richard is worried that any continued association between us could jeopardize not just this contract, but PNDG's reputation for future projects." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, but Liam could hear Emma's resolve crystallizing as she spoke. She was being forced to choose between their relationship and the company she had spent years building, between personal happiness and professional survival. The choice was complicated by her responsibilities to her employees, to Sophie's financial security, and to the investors who had trusted her with millions of dollars. "I think we need to step back for a while," Emma finally said, the words sounding rehearsed, as if she had been practicing them. "I need to focus on protecting PNDG and ensuring that Sophie's future is secure. Getting involved with you again, as much as I want to, might not be fair to either of us right now." Liam stared at the darkening sky above his workshop, feeling the familiar ache of losing Emma all over again. Is this about the business pressure, Or is this about you realizing that I don't fit into the life you've built? That's not fair, Emma replied sharply. You know this isn't about social class or money. But I have obligations that go beyond my personal feelings. If I lose this contract because of a perceived conflict of interest, it affects everyone who works for P&DG. It affects Sophie's college fund and her medical insurance. I can't make decisions based only on what I want. The week that followed was one of the most difficult of Liam's adult life. He threw himself into work with desperate intensity, taking on additional projects and working late into the evening to avoid the quiet hours when his thoughts inevitably turned to Emma and the possibility they were letting slip away again. The completed ramp at Riverside Elementary served as a daily reminder of how their paths had crossed, perfectly functional and beautifully integrated with the school's architecture, but now representing loss rather than connection. Sophie's confusion about the sudden absence of their weekend outings broke Liam's heart more than his own disappointment. When she asked why he wasn't coming to dinner anymore, Emma had apparently explained that he was busy with other projects, but Sophie was too perceptive to accept such a simplistic explanation for the adults. Obvious distress. The community center where Liam taught weekend woodworking classes became his refuge, a place where he could channel his frustration into helping others learn skills that would serve them throughout their lives. His students that month benefited from his intense focus and attention to detail, as he poured all of his suppressed emotional energy into demonstrating proper technique for dovetail joints and mortise and tenon construction. Meanwhile, Emma was fighting battles on multiple fronts. The board meeting on Monday had been even more contentious than she had anticipated, with several members questioning not just her judgment regarding personal relationships, but her overall fitness for leadership during a critical period of company growth. Richard Blackstone had been supportive but firm in his assessment that any continued public association with Liam would be professional suicide. The city council meetings leading up to the contract vote became exercises in political theater, with Emma forced to defend P&DG's qualifications while navigating subtle questions about her personal life that would never have been directed at a male CEO in similar circumstances. She answered every inquiry with professional composure, but the constant scrutiny was exhausting and demoralizing. The breaking point came when Sophie's teacher, Mrs. Davidson, called to express concern about the child's recent behavior changes. Sophie had become withdrawn during class discussions, was struggling to complete assignments that had previously been easy for her, and had asked several times whether people could stop loving each other because of their jobs. I think she's confused about why certain people have disappeared from her life, Mrs. Davidson explained delicately. She's mentioned that she misses talking to the carpenter who built our ramp, and she seems to think that you're upset about something she doesn't understand. That evening, Emma sat in Sophie's bedroom, watching her daughter arrange chess pieces on a board that Liam had given her as a gift during one of their weekend outings. The chess set was beautifully crafted from maple and walnut, with pieces that showed the careful attention to detail that characterized all of Liam's work. Sweetheart, you know that sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions about their time and their work. Emma began carefully. Mr. Liam is very busy with his carpentry projects, and I'm very busy with my company projects. But you were happier when he was around, Sophie replied without looking up from the chessboard. You used to sing in the kitchen when you were cooking dinner, and you stopped doing that. And you keep staring at your phone like you're waiting for someone to call. The 8-year-old's observations were devastatingly accurate, and Emma realized that her attempts to shield Sophie from the adult complications in their lives had been largely unsuccessful. Children were remarkably skilled at reading emotional atmospheres, and Sophie had clearly sensed the loss and regret that Emma was trying to hide. Sometimes people care about each other very much, but circumstances make it difficult for them to spend time together, Emma explained, feeling inadequate in the face of Sophie's direct questions. Like Romeo and Juliet? Sophie asked, referencing a simplified version of the story she had encountered in her advanced reading class. Something like that, Emma agreed, though she hoped their situation wouldn't end with the same tragic finality. As October turned to November, the distance between Emma and Liam began to feel permanent rather than temporary. They had no natural opportunities to encounter each other, and both were too proud to initiate contact that might complicate the other's professional situation. The farmer's market on Saturdays became a place Emma avoided, and Liam found himself taking different routes through town to minimize the chance of accidentally seeing her. The city council vote was scheduled for the first Tuesday in December, but Emma was beginning to realize that winning the contract might feel hollow if the cost was losing the opportunity to rebuild the most meaningful relationship of her adult life. Success without personal fulfillment was a concept she understood intellectually, but experiencing it emotionally was proving more difficult than she had anticipated. The question that haunted both of them was whether love could survive the pressures of professional ambition and social expectations, or whether some gaps between different worlds were simply too wide to bridge without sacrificing everything else that mattered. The phone call came at 11:30 on a Tuesday night in December, 3 days before the city council vote that would determine PNDG's future. Emma's voice was shaky with controlled emotion as she explained that Sophie had been rushed to the emergency room after experiencing complications from a routine medical procedure. The surgery to address a recurring issue with her spinal fluid drainage had gone well, but Sophie was asking for Liam and refusing to settle down for the recovery period the doctors insisted was crucial. Liam arrived at Riverside General Hospital still wearing his work clothes, having dropped everything at his workshop when Emma's call came through. He found Sophie sitting up in her hospital bed, looking small and pale but with the same determined expression she wore when solving difficult chess problems. The moment she saw him, her face lit up with relief and joy that made his chest tighten with emotion. "I knew you'd come," Sophie said simply, reaching out to take his hand. "The doctors say I have to stay still for 3 days, but it's really boring here. Will you tell me about what you're building in your workshop?" For the next hour, Liam sat beside Sophie's bed, describing in careful detail the custom dollhouse he was creating for a client's daughter, complete with working miniature lights and tiny furniture that required precision carving. Sophie listened with rapt attention, asking technical questions about joinery and finish work that helped distract her from the discomfort of her medical situation. Emma watched from the corner of the room, seeing how naturally Liam interacted with her daughter, how his presence calmed Sophie's anxiety in ways that no amount of medical reassurance had managed to achieve. When Sophie finally drifted off to sleep, still holding Liam's hand, Emma made a decision that had been building in her heart for weeks. "I'm withdrawing PNDG's bid for the city contract," she said quietly, not wanting to wake Sophie, but needing to speak the words aloud to make them real. Liam looked at her with surprise and concern. "Emma, you can't do that because of me. That contract represents everything you've worked toward." "No," Emma replied firmly. "Everything I've worked toward is in this room right now. Sophie needs stability and people who love her unconditionally. I need to stop letting other people's opinions dictate how I live my life. The company will survive without this one contract, but I don't want to spend another 15 years wondering what might have happened if I had chosen love over ambition." The decision to step back from the contract bid sent shockwaves through PNDG's board of directors. But Emma handled the crisis with the same strategic thinking that had made her successful in business. She restructured the company's growth plans, focusing on smaller, sustainable projects that aligned with her values while providing stability for her employees. Some board members resigned in protest, but others expressed relief that the company could pursue its mission without the political complications that had surrounded the city contract. 6 months later, Liam and Emma were married in a small ceremony at the Riverside Community Center, surrounded by friends from both of their worlds and dozens of children from Sophie's school who had become invested in their love story. Sophie served as maid of honor, walking down the aisle in her wheelchair decorated with flowers that Liam had grown in the garden of their new home. The house they bought together was a compromise between Emma's taste for modern design and Liam's appreciation for traditional craftsmanship, a restored craftsman bungalow that Liam renovated to be fully accessible for Sophie while maintaining its historic character. Emma's home office occupied the converted attic space, while Liam's workshop took over the detached garage, creating a perfect blend of their professional and personal lives. PNDG evolved into a boutique firm specializing in accessible housing and community development, with Liam serving as a consultant on adaptive construction techniques. Their collaborative approach to business proved as successful as their marriage, combining Emma's strategic vision with Liam's practical expertise to create housing solutions that served families with diverse needs. Sophie thrived in their blended household, continuing to excel academically while developing her chess skills under the guidance of a local master who recognized her exceptional talent. But more importantly, she grew up surrounded by adults who demonstrated daily that love was more valuable than professional status, that families came in many different configurations, and that the best solutions to life's problems usually required people working together rather than competing against each other. The ramp at Riverside Elementary remained a symbol of how unexpected encounters could transform lives completely. Students using the ramp each day had no idea that its construction had brought together a family that proved love could overcome any obstacle when people were willing to choose each other over the expectations of a world that often valued success more than happiness. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.